Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Ratchet and Clank. If you're wondering, no, I have not ever played the video game. In fact, I'd never heard of Ratchet and Clank before I heard of this movie. So I will pretty much be reviewing it just as a movie by itself, not really about the adaptation process or anything like that, because I don't really know it. But I guess usually the school of thought on things like this is a film should stand on its own, and you shouldn't have to have played the video game or read the comic book or read the book or watch the TV show or anything like that. You should be able to come in cold and have a good experience if it's a good enough of a movie. So that's how I experienced Ratchet and Clank, and it kind of reminded me of watching a Saturday morning cartoon. Not the show you really cared about or were really into or would tape all of and talk to your friends about and play in your backyard, and would be like a show you'd be obsessed with and you know every character and every plotline, you'd watch it every time it reran and everything like that. More like the cartoon that was on and you watched it, and sure, it was between Tasmania and something else, and you were like, well, fine, I'm here, and I kind of enjoy it, and it's fine enough, and it's kind of like a nice, disposable, fine, animated, fun experience, and that to me was Ratchet and Clank. I couldn't really get that into it or connect with it really on any sort of level, but I didn't hate it. I wasn't mad at it. I was kind of like, it is kind of what it is. It's a very smarmy, know-it-all, fun, animated space romp of a cartoon, and if you're going for that, and if you're like a 7-year-old, I'm sure it's like one of those movies you rent once and then forget about. It's like a fun, disposable kid experience, but it's so inoffensive and good in that kind of weird guise, I guess I'm putting it in. I was kind of fine with it, but I was fine with it for the little time I had with it. It's not like I fell in love with the idea of Ratchet and Clank or were really interested in the idea of Ratchet and Clank. This was kind of like chewing gum that as soon as I was done with it, I spit it out, and I will probably completely forget about it. This is based on the original Ratchet and Clank game, how Ratchet, who is a Lombax, who has been left on a planet by himself and has lived there all his life. They're not sure where he came from, and he's on this planet working in a garage, and he hears that the Galactic Rangers are recruiting another member in their group, and then he tries to try out for that and try out for Captain Quark, and they turn him away, and he's very disappointed about that until the robot Clank crash lands on his planet, and they become friends and stop a big alien invasion because of one of Ratchet's inventions with this car, and they both become members of the Galactic Rangers and have to stop Dr. Nefarious and Chairman Drek from making this weird planet that's made out of other planets and destroying the universe and all that regular shit, Watching this movie did kind of remind me of kind of fun, TV movie quality space adventure type of things. And it's directed by Kevin Monroe, who also directed TMNT. I guess it's higher on the scale of Ninja Turtle movies. I like it more than the more recent ones, frankly. And that was a lot of fun. That was like a fun animated adventure. And when I heard he was directing it, I was actually kind of interested. I thought, hey, maybe this might not be half bad. I wouldn't mind watching a fun animated movie at the end of the week. And I don't know if it really displays that. I think this is more really a thing for kids who will have the patience, believe it or not, even though I'm talking about kids here, have the patience for something like this. I don't think it really registers for anyone older than that, and I'm not saying that to be demeaning. I'm really talking about the movie here. I mean, I had fun with it in that idea, but the whole thing with how smarmy it is, it has constant jokes, constant backhanded, smart alecky kind of jokes going throughout it, and way worse than anything Deadpool could ever do, because at least Deadpool had original jokes and things that people will quote. These are jokes I've heard from 27 other different cartoons this week alone, and Ratchet and Clank is better at doing that than something like, I don't know, the recent Powerpuff Girls reboot, but it's not very original with anything it's doing. It makes references of things, but the whole time you're watching it, it feels relatively empty because there's nothing original to attach itself to. Even though I think the whole concept is kind of cool, apparently it is pretty faithful to the video game, and it's actually made by Insomniac Games, who created Ratchet and Clank, and I've noticed that's the thing with this wave of video game movies with Angry Birds and Warcraft coming out later this year, is that the developer actually helped with the production, and so this is relatively faithful. It does the kind of adaptation that I always thought they should do with video game movies, in that it's just primarily based on the first video game, which I think was smart actually, and they used a lot of voices from the video game. They put in some celebrity voices, but for the most part, the leads like Ratchet and Clank and Captain Quark, and a lot of the characters actually, I believe, are actually voiced by people from the video game. You have Paul Giamatti as Chairman Drek. You have Sylvester Stallone in there, who I actually thought was one of the better celebrity voices because he was at least well utilized. Everyone else you probably wouldn't even notice. Like Rosario Dawson, I mean, unless you know who she is, you're not really going to notice her so much. Or if you are familiar, I guess, with the video game voices. But I did like that they did that. Most of the time, you know, they recast stuff, and that's kind of bullshit. But at least they stayed consistent with that. I think that speaks to how they want to stay faithful to the video game and kind of try to replicate it into a new medium. I don't know if it's really that successful because it just ends up feeling very generic. And I don't think necessarily they had the greatest filmmaker. Apparently they were considering making a live action version of this, and Edgar Wright was considered for a little bit, but he left to do Hot Fuzz, and Del Toro was attached at a certain point, but he left for creative differences. To do a really good video game movie, you need someone who really loves video games and is also, you know, a really good director and knows how to turn that into a new medium. If you look at how comic book movies have happened, it's because those directors understood comic books and understand how to translate that into a new medium. I think if they had a better director, because it's kind of generic plot-wise, it's not like that special, and this film is frankly mostly plot. There's a couple sequences that aren't plot, like Ratchet playing around with guns and certain sequences, but there's not a lot of character development, which makes it really hard to connect yourself with Ratchet or Clank. And this is a short movie, so it's like moving through this plot, but it's not an interesting plot, so you're just like, what the hell am I exactly watching here? And then all these jokes like, of course this is gonna happen, but it's like, of course this is gonna happen through your, of course, traditional plot. So it's like you calling out yourself doing a traditional plot doesn't make it less traditional or make you like more creative or something like that. Deadpool kind of had a similar thing, but I think the difference is Deadpool was a lot funnier with it and a lot more original, and Ratchet and Clank like even less so than that. I think I just felt while I was watching the movie such a separation from it, and I really don't normally feel that way. I really just felt like I could not connect to anybody in it. It felt a very empty kind of cartoon in a lot of ways. It felt like more of a product than a story I would get swept up into. The problem with things when they're so faithful, they're more about capturing all these little moments than going like, well, we cut this out because it needed to work better in a movie and this needed to work and things like that. And it didn't feel like they made any of those sacrifices for the Ratchet and Clank movie, or at least for me watching. I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they moved stuff around and changed things to presumably get it to work, but it didn't feel that way on screen. I've noticed that with a lot of like young adult film adaptations, they feel very conservative in terms of their adaptations, and you wind up with a much worse movie. You need to understand how to get that to work for the movie, not just like pleasing a million fans, because in the end you're not going to please anyone, because I thought the point of making these films is for other people to see them, and I just never really got that from that, because I got the impression like if you knew who Ratchet and Clank were, you'd have more of a connection. But that to me screams out terrible narrative. I need to play the game and then watch the movie. That's not how really movies should work, and that's not how anything narratively honestly should work. You know, I actually kind of think Ratchet could be a cool character in Clank as well, and it could be even a better like animated series, frankly, and you could like develop this over time, and this one movie could be a season or something like that. But pushing all this into like a short animated film just really absolutely didn't work. I guess I wasn't disappointed because I think it overall has like a fun vibe to it, and I wasn't like upset or anything. It just like very much washed over me, but washed over me in kind of a fun, enjoyable, poppy, kind of sugary cereal way that you're kind of like fine with while it's going on, but then you move along with your day and forget what you had for breakfast. It's a fun, disposable, poppy, sugary experience that you'll probably not remember in a month, and I think that's about as memorable as I can think that this movie will probably be. But I think even with that suggestion, I'm being incredibly optimistic. So if you have seen Ratchet and Clank and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.